as you know, I often try to share with you kind of like share, not share. I tell you, I try to explain to you sometimes. Sharing is what you do with food. Talking is what you do. Someone in the room is pretty uptight about that word. No, I'm just kidding. No. So now it's in my head, right? But I sometimes try to talk with you about like kind of where I'm at in life, like how, like what's things I'm struggling with, what things I'm not doing well. Because I really do try to be transparent with you. And today I've decided to do something completely different from that. Today, I'm going to tell you something I'm really good at. I'm really amazing at this, and it's impressive. When you watch me at work, it's hard to imagine how somebody could be as good at it as I am. And that is how to ruin a really good weekend with your wife. I'm the best at it. I'm literally the best at it. Sharon would probably agree, but a couple of weekends ago, last weekend actually, Sharon and I, we had a chance to get away, and so we tried to go do some things, and so we went to this lodge up in Montana, and it was really fun. On the way there, we dropped my car off at a shop in Spokane and had some work done on it, and was going to pick it up on the way back. And then we just went up to this lodge. It's a big lodge, and it's probably 6,000 or 7,000 square feet, big fireplace, amazing commercial kitchen, and no one was there. It was literally just me and Charlene. We just bounced around in this place, and we read by the fire. We ate good food. My dream, the next house that I build, if I get to build one more, which is kind of my hope, is going to just be a commercial kitchen with a big fireplace in one corner, surrounded by bedrooms and a bathroom. Right? I just love to play in the kitchen. I love to be in the kitchen and just to use all the things. And this one had some fun gadgets, and so we were, playing in the kitchen. It was just really great. And we just slept really well. One of the nights I slept like 9 hours. I don't even know how that happened. I don't remember the last. Do you remember the last time you slept 9 hours? Got up in this morning, in the morning, Sharon's like, "Are you okay?" Like, I think so. Why? You were just, every time, I woke up, you were just really asleep. I don't know. It was good. It was kind of fun. We were talking to the owners of the lodge and kind of like, "Hey, what's it like up here? Do you get a lot of wildlife up here?" And he said, "Yeah, there's moose, and elk, and there's deer, and there's coyotes, and there's, bears, grizzly bears, and black bears, and brown bears." He said, "Don't worry, though. The grizzly bears are across the road." Oh, good. As long as they're across the road, all is well, right? But we just had this really great weekend, and we just kind of rested. And sometimes it's just nice. We actually invited the kids to come with us, and none of them could. And it actually turned out to be really cool that we just, it was just the two of us, and it was really super restful time. We're coming back on Sunday, and the plan on Sunday was to come back to Spokane and go to church with Jonathan, and I'd pick up the car. And so it was just a great weekend. And so I had this all mapped out in my mind for Sunday morning, like how Sunday morning was going to go. And here's how Sunday morning was going to go. We were going to leave the lodge at 8:45. We were going to arrive at the Volkswagen dealership at 10. We were going to pick up the car at 10, and that was going to be easy. And then we were going to go grab Jonathan about 10:30, and then we were going to go, or 10:40, and then we were going to get to church around 10:40 or 10:45, which is 15-20 minutes before it started. And it was just going to be this incredibly relaxing day. And then when it got done, we were going to have lunch with Johnny. We were going to just drive home. We were going to get home early enough to just have a great, just like an evening, because, Sharon was starting school the next day and all that. And so that was my plan. And I didn't have to write this down, you see, because I have this all mapped out in my head. And I did share some of it with Charlene, right? Like, okay, I think, we can leave at 8:45, and okay, that'll be good. And so it was just a great weekend until we left. Because we left at 9:15, not 8:45. So then we're like driving, and I'm watching, sometimes it's not that helpful to have the navigation, is it? You're like, I know that I'm only going to barely get there on time. But we made up a little bit of time, and things were going okay. I spent about, the first 10, 15 minutes or so giving Charlene some pointers on how to leave earlier, and that was helpful. She was very grateful for that. She took some notes, and it was a great start to the last day of our weekend. It was perfect. And I should know better than this, but I don't, because that's the sort of person that I have not yet overcome. So we go, and all of a sudden we realize, well, we have enough gas, because now you have the thing that tells you how many miles to empty. So I knew we had enough gas to get to Johnny, but I thought, well, the gas is a nickel cheaper in Idaho. We should stop and get, no, we'll just go. No, let's stop and get gas. No, well, there's this place right up here. It's just right off the street. Okay, we'll stop. And so we stop and we get gas, and because we had all kinds of time. I was don't stop, do stop, don't stop, whatever. Finally, we get to the VW place. It's 10:35. I'm like, okay, Charlene, you just go grab Johnny. We'll meet at church, and maybe I'll get there in time, whatever. And so I got, all the stuff it's on my phone. The navigation's on my phone, and the guy goes and gets my car. It takes him a few minutes longer than I thought, and I tried to hustle him, but it just didn't work. And I get in the car, and I put my phone on. I'm watching the navigation. As soon as I turn on the street, I don't know Spokane that well enough to get around, but not well enough to be timely. As soon as I got on the street, my phone went dead. I'm plugging it in and pushing the buttons, and I'm just like, it's crazy. And my brain, I'm just like going 1,000 miles an hour. Now I am really not doing well. And so we get to church, and Charlotte and Jonathan end up right behind me in line. And, I don't know why this church has to be healthy and growing, but the one we decided to go to is. So we're trying to pull in the parking lot. There's like 150 cars. I can't get across. The church people trying to get in the driveway will not let me in. Now I'm like, I'm ready to just, right? Then I got in the parking lot, and the parking lot was packed. And that was annoying. No one saved a space for me, so I've been looking for a parking spot. Finally, we get a parking spot. We get inside, get a cup of coffee. It was packed in this church. It's a great church summit. We really had fun there. But I just want to tell you that by the time I got into church, even though we were singing about God's goodness and faithfulness, I was like, anybody smiles at me, I'm going to kill him. It just was not the best day. And I was really disappointed because I was really looking forward to visiting this church and being with Johnny there and being with Charlene. And we had this great weekend, and it just upended me. And then we did get home, and it wasn't too late when we got home. And then we just were kind of vegging out on Sunday night, and I decided to make some popcorn. But then there wasn't enough because the boys had been home. Well, we got to go around the neighborhood, which is lucky. We have lots of family close by to see if I could borrow popcorn. And I just like I was just a mental case by this time at 7 o'clock at night. And I started to reflect on the day, and sometimes I try to do that. Like, what's going on here? What really happened today? What's the real issue of today? Because it's not that we left a few minutes late. It's not even that we, needed to get gas. It was none of those things. And I started to reflect on sort of where I'm at in life. And as it was the first Sunday of the year, I'd been thinking about what's going on in my life and what needs to change. And I realized that what happened last weekend was that I fell back into my default position, which is trying to stuff too many things into one day or 1 hour. I did it again yesterday, and I don't know why I can't get over this, but I had a wedding yesterday. It was at 2. It's like 2. That's halfway through the day. So I was going to make some jerky on my Traeger, and when I started to make the jerky, I realized that I needed to clean the Traeger, and I realized I didn't have what I needed, so I needed to go to Lowe's, and so I went to Lowe's, and I got back. By the time I got the jerky on the Traeger, it was noon, and I was going to go work out before the wedding early and be done, and then relax. And I walked in here for the wedding 10 minutes before it started. And I don't know about you, but after I've been at the gym, I get real heated up, and so now I'm pouring sweat, and I'm and I look at myself in the mirror. I was like, why do you continually do this to yourself? And I do. And as I was reflecting on that this last week, I realized that the one thing that has to be changed in my life personally is I have to get rid of hurry. And some of that means simplifying. Maybe you wonder today why it was just me on the guitar. Well, in some ways, it was just easy. We had a wedding here, so we cleared everything off. We were going to have the carpets restretched up here on Monday, so I just thought, we'll just make it simple, and we'll take everything away, but also just the simplicity of, just doing it simple. It's not as cool as like having a big band and having a bunch of voices, and that's tons of fun, by the way. I love that too. But there's a simplicity sometimes that we can bring to life that makes life better even. It's not as flashy, and it's not as impressive, and it's not making as much noise. But that to me is where my life needs to change. And so as I'm looking at my life and thinking about it for this coming year, like I have to work at this. Dallas Willard was asked by John Ortberg, like, what's the most important thing to do to have healthy spiritual growth? And Dallas Willard says, you must ruthlessly remove hurry from your life. And John Ortberg, who's, he's kind of a probably type A personality, he's like, okay, I got that. Remove hurry. Okay, what else? What else is there? He's like, no, that's it. That's it. You have to ruthlessly remove hurry from your life. Now, that's what I need to do. And I recognize that. I have written down some ideas about how I'm going to do that. I'm not particularly asking you to keep me accountable to that or email me tips on it. If you do want to keep me accountable, emailing tips would be better than telling me in person. But that's just what I need, right? I know that that's what needs to happen in order for me to bear fruit in 2020. Because currently, I live my life on the edge of hurry. I have, I think, hurry sickness. And much of what it comes down to for me is trying to plug in too many things into a life that's already full. And so I'm working on that. How do I simplify my life? How do I remove things from my life that are not necessary? How do I not do things when I feel an urge to do them, when I have something coming up? The wedding yesterday went great. It was fine. I was totally prepared for it. So it wasn't like I needed to get here and write anything. I just came, and I wasn't resting internally when I got here. And so it just changed it, and it made the experience for me not as good as it could have been. And I don't know how it was for people who were here. Hopefully it was okay for them. But I just realized there have to be changes in my life. If I want to really be fruitful in my life, there's some changes that have to happen. I think the frustrating thing for me is that this is not a new problem. And so I've cultivated hurry quite productively. And so it's not going to go away in a minute. It's going to take some real discipline and some real work. It's going to mean saying no to things that I would love to say yes to. And the things I want to say yes to are most things, because I love doing stuff. I love being invited. I love to dive into projects, and I love to fill my life up with things that are fun. But that's what it is for me in 2020. And so I want to ask you just for a minute, what is it for you? What's got to go? Might not be hurry. Some of you could use a little more hurry in your life. Maybe you're, maybe you need some more discipline to go faster or do more. I don't know what it is. Maybe there's some habitual behavior in your life that has to go in order for you to be fruitful and for you to live a life that's filled with joy. And so that's a question that we can sometimes ask. What is it that's stealing your joy? And that was the question that came to my mind as Charlotte and I were driving, and finally I got hold of my emotions kind of about halfway to Spokane. I said to Charlotte, I'm really sorry. I really am sorry. I don't want to behave this way. I don't want to have this angst. And as I was reflecting on what is it, and I realized that what was stealing my joy at that moment, the joy of a great weekend, was that I had put so much hurry in my life that it stole what God really had given me as a rest. And I thought, Satan has stolen this wonderful weekend of rest from me because I allowed it. I opened the door for it. And so, what is it in your life that as you look forward into 2020, what's got to go in order for joy to be real for you this year? What needs to change? What's got to happen? We're going to be talking a lot this year about Moses Lake Christian Church is, when it's its healthiest, we are engaged in authentic, life-giving relationships. That's what the church is. When we are at our healthiest as a church, as many people as possible who are a part of this church are engaged in authentic, life-giving relationships. And so I was asking myself again that question. What keeps me from being engaged in authentic, life-giving relationships? What draws me away? And even the reality, again, of hurry for me. I don't have time. Everything's pushing me. You find yourself ever in that place where it's like, I'd love to have this conversation with you, but I really, truly cannot because I have not given myself enough margin to have a conversation. But it might be something different for you. What is it? What is it that's keeping you from being fruitful in the kingdom? What is it that's keeping you from being the person Christ most wants you to be, which is the best version of yourself? That's what he came to do. He came to redeem you and to create in you his life and to make you the best version of yourself you can be. That's the abundant life, the blessed life, is the best you can be. What needs to go? What needs to change for you to be the best version of yourself? And I was thinking about John 15, and it was interesting because when we got to this church, the pastor was actually preaching on John 15. And I don't know if I heard any of it, but my mind was somewhere else. But I've been talking a little bit with Dana as she's been on sabbatical about this passage and the word abide and that sense of what does it look like to abide and bear fruit. And so I want to just take a couple of minutes with you in John 15 this morning and just break this down for a minute. So turn to John chapter 15, and we're going to read verses 1 through 11. John 15, verses 1 through 11. And this is what Jesus says to his disciples. I am the true vine, and my Father is the vine dresser. Every branch in me that does not bear fruit, he takes away, and every branch that does bear fruit, he prunes, that it may bear more fruit. Already you are clean because of the word that I've spoken to you. Abide in me, and I in you. As the branch cannot bear fruit by itself unless it abides in the vine, neither can you unless you abide in me. I am the vine, you are the branches. Whoever abides in me and I in him, he it is that bears much fruit, for apart from me you can do nothing. If anyone does not abide in me, he's thrown away like a branch and withers, and the branches are gathered, thrown into the fire and burned. If you abide in me and my words abide in you, ask whatever you wish and it'll be done for you. By this my Father is glorified, that you bear much fruit and so prove to be my disciples. As the Father's loved me, so I have loved you. Abide in my love. If you keep my commandments, you will abide in my love, just as I have kept my Father's commandments and abide in his love. These things I've spoken to you, that my joy may be in you, and that your joy may be full. And so this is a passage that, if you've been in church any time at all, you're familiar with. And so what does Jesus say to the disciples in this text? Well, the first thing he says is this: a fruitful life begins with pruning off the dead stuff, right? A fruitful life begins with pruning off the dead stuff. Every branch in me that does not bear fruit, he takes away. Now, there are times when we understand these pictures that Jesus uses, and maybe you're not someone who takes care of lots of trees and stuff, but you probably are a person who's noticed that when a tree gets filled with branches, when there are too many branches, when it's all cobbled up with branches, it tends to get, the light can't get into the center of the tree, and there's nutrients going to branches that are not bearing fruit, and so the best thing to do is to cut those away. And I know I've shared this with you before, but over the last couple of years, I've been trying to think about how to make my tomato plants more productive, and so I read about pruning. You know, there's a lot of little stems and limbs on a tomato plant that don't bear any fruit. They're just taking energy from the plant. It's just sucking the life out of the plant. And so I started to read about pruning, and I started pruning, and I started tying up my tomatoes, and it was amazing to me how much more fruitful the tomato plants were. Not just that they bore a lot of fruit, but that the fruit got ripe. Before that, often by the end of the year, we'd start to get tomatoes, but it wasn't like we had them all through the summer. And as I began to learn about pruning, as I started pruning, it made the plants more healthy and also got the fruit ripened faster. There's more sunlight getting in. There's more nutrients going to the fruit. And so the idea about pruning is that you got to keep at it. Stuff that's dead needs to go. And so the question for us is, what's dead? You know, for me, I've already told you, for me what it is this year, it's hurry. It has to go. It's sucking the life out of me. And that means some things. That means I'm going to have to do some other things. And it's not going to be easy for me. I just tell you that. I just know that I could get to the end of this year and find that nothing has changed if I can't make some really specific habitual changes. so Jesus says to them, look, this is how it works. That the branches that aren't producing have to be cut off. And he gives us this picture, which I think we've sometimes wondered, what is he really talking about? That the branches that he cuts off dry up and get burned in the fire. I think maybe we try to make a lot out of that. I think he's just simply saying, here's the deal. If there's a plant that has branches on it, if there's a tree that has branches on it that are unfruitful, you cut them off. And now they're really unfruitful, and they're just going to wither away. They're not worth anything. You just burn them to get rid of them. They're not helpful. And so just let me ask you again, what in your life is not helpful? What is not helping you to be fruitful in the kingdom? What's not helping you to have a joy-filled life? What's stealing your joy? What are you engaging in that's wasting time that you look back later and go, wow, that was really a waste of time, or that really stole the joy of a moment for me that I could have had because I let that get in. But a fruitful life just starts with pruning off stuff that is not producing fruit. It has to go. And so probably for most of us, we can pick at things that say, that needs to go. For me to really live the kind of abundant life that Christ intends, that God has promised me, there's some stuff that needs to go. And that's, we're all different in this room. I know not everyone has the same struggles and challenges I have. It's a good thing. We'd all be at each other's throats. But we do have stuff that needs to go. And then the second thing that he goes on to say is that fruit bearing is enhanced by cutting off the unnecessary stuff from the branches that are bearing fruit. Right? It's not just getting rid of the stuff that shouldn't be there, that's actually literally stealing the life from the plant. But if you do have a plant that's healthy, if your life is healthy, there's some stuff that needs to be tended to. And so even as I look at my life, the fact that I have a tendency, I am a type A personality, I'm an extrovert by nature, I'm a lover of people by nature, and that pushes me to do those things, and it pushes me to fill up my schedule, and it pushes me to get one more thing done. Ultimately, that's how I'm wired. I don't want to sit around and complain about the way I'm wired, but how do I make that part of who I am more fruitful? So what is it? How do I fine-tune that? What is it in your life that needs to be fine-tuned? Because there's some stuff that probably needs to be shaved away, even in the good things that you're doing. There's some things that you need to lean into maybe a little bit more. Notice that he says that the fruitful branches are also going to be pruned. But now we're just taking off the bits that aren't necessary in the fruitful branch. But the goal is to be more fruitful. Right? The goal is that we would be more fruitful, that we would become more the people that God wants us to be. That we would become people whose lives really spill over with the fruit of the kingdom. And we'll get into that in just a minute. But what needs to be fine-tuned so that your life is spilling over into the kingdom? Maybe it's adding something. Maybe your life is being consumed by yourself. And honestly, there are ways that you could lean into loving people more. It'd be adding something to your life might enhance your fruit bearing. Maybe it's engaging in relationship. Maybe your problem is the opposite of me. Instead of diving into everything that's out there, you isolate yourself and not dive into anything. And so you find yourself not engaged in authentic life-giving relationships because you spend your time not engaged in authentic life-giving relationships. You spend your time at home, or you spend your time in isolation. And some of that's really healthy. I actually have to weave isolation into my life purposefully. I have to weave solitude and silence in. It's one of the most important spiritual disciplines for me. For you, it could be celebration. Could be going to a party once in a while. That might be what needs to happen in order for you to be more fruitful in the kingdom. Right? Because maybe your issue isn't that you're too involved, it's that you're not involved enough. So you got to work that out. I don't know what that is for you. Maybe you're spending time, browsing the internet that you could actually be with people, or maybe, I don't know what it is, but what is it that needs to be fine-tuned? The goal is that your life would be bearing more and better fruit. That you would be seen as a tree that's spilling the fruit of the kingdom into the world around you. And so, what are the things maybe that need to be sprinkled into your life a little more this year to help you to become the people that God would want you to be, the best version of yourself, and have the abundant life. But Jesus says, I really want to do that. And the reality of the case is that the most important part of the process here is what he says next, that abiding is central to fruit bearing. If you want to know, and maybe you're sitting here going, I'm not really sure, let me invite you to step into more relationship with Christ in some way. Because as we walk with him, he makes clear to us what needs to go, what needs to be added. Abiding in Christ is central to fruit bearing. And in fact, there can't be any fruit apart from abiding in Christ. Another thing that I'm really good at is trying to sort out all the details of my life so I can make it work. And I find myself sometimes being called, and I think, how am I going to do this? And I start really agonizing over the details. I'm going to work it all out, and I'm going to fix it all up. And I found myself recently just being challenged by God to let me handle the details. I felt like I heard him say that to me. Like, why don't you sit back for a minute and just let me, you're not that good at running the world. How about you let me do it for a minute? And I heard that because I took a minute to be quiet. How about you just let me handle this? And so abiding is really central to the whole process of fruit bearing. He says, abide in me and I in you, as the branch cannot bear fruit by itself. It's not just that it's hard for the branch. It's impossible. It doesn't happen. And that's what he says earlier, right? If you take a branch and you cut it off from the vine and you throw it into a pile, it dries up and it withers away. It's not going to keep growing. He's saying, apart from me, you can't do anything. So you can't do anything unless you abide in me. So what's abide mean? The word means to remain, or to dwell, or to live in, or to soak in. And so there's the question. Are we living, abiding, remaining, soaking in the presence of Christ? And how do we do that? Well, I think we do that in authentic, life-giving relationships. We do it as we spend time in the Word. We do it as we spend time in worship. We do it as we spend time in prayer and in solitude and silence. I want to challenge you this year not to be lazy as it comes to even being here on Sunday morning. Look, this isn't the best show in town, I'm sure of it. This isn't like, the playoffs in the football season. People showing up 3 hours early, sitting in the front row. Do you have a few people sitting in the front row? Thank you for that. We appreciate it. Right? Go to a football game, you pay $150 for a ticket. Oh, well, no, you wouldn't pay $150 for a ticket in the front row, would you? I wouldn't know what you would pay for a ticket in the front row. And I can't imagine being in the front row of a football game for a whole football game. I don't know what I would do. But it's important to be present. You can't be in a relationship unless you're present. You remember, some of us are old enough to remember this. When Chris said that he and Hillary had been married 20 years, I almost fainted. Chris and Hillary moved to Moses Lake right after you got married, wasn't it? And I realized we were 10 years before Chris and Hillary came. I've known Chris and Hillary for 20 years. That seems crazy to me. That's a long time. But you remember back in the day, some of us who are a little older, when people were saying this, it's really not the quantity of time, it's the quality. Do you know what that means? Nothing. I've come to believe it's meaningless. There is no such thing as quality time without quantity time. I mean, okay, you can maybe argue against that a little bit. But I think we said that to say, we're really busy, but we're really going to spend quality time when we get it. Let me just tell you how quality my time was when I got to church last Sunday. Because I filled so much, I don't think that quality happens without, or quantity, when it comes to relationship. And so, the average church, the average person who's really engaged, this is some research, statistics, I know you love that. I'm really into it myself. The person who's actively engaged in a church attends on average 1.6 times a month. Let me just break that down for you. What that means is the people that we would consider really engaged at Moses Lake Christian Church attend on average 1.6 times a month. Because there's lots to do. And I'm not here to batter you about showing up at church. We're not a denominational church. We have no one to brag to. It's like we're not even sure who to tell when things grow. I'm just saying, what would happen if you, instead of attending 1.6 times, and many of you are, so again, I'm not criticizing, what would happen if instead of 1.6, it was 2.6? What if you almost came every week? Here's what I think. I think you'd find yourself in relationship with people and in relationship with Christ more because you're connecting. But Jesus says you have to abide in me. We can't do that alone. We need each other, and we need him. So Jesus says, don't go it alone. If you don't abide in me, you can't bear fruit. You just can't. And you need to, because that's what you're made for. We can't do it alone. We weren't meant to. So what will enhance your abiding? Maybe there's something you need to sprinkle in this year to enhance your abiding. Maybe it's a Bible reading program. You know, with the advent of digital technology, which is not always good, there's some really amazing things. I find myself using lots of different platforms. One of the things I've been doing routinely, not every day, but I'll get up and my iPad is there, and it's because it's my clock and my alarm and all that. And I'll pick it up and I'll open up one of my Bible apps and read the verse of the day. I've tried to start the days that. It's a simple thing. It's not like I don't ever read the Bible, but it's a simple thing. What could you sprinkle in? Maybe it's diving into a life group this year. I want to invite you to consider becoming a part of a life group. Sean and I have been a part of a life group almost for the first time in the last 30 years. We've been a part of it for a couple, maybe 3 years, I don't know. It's just been great. I look forward to it every week. It's just been life-giving. It's been fun. We laugh a lot. Last week, we actually just kind of talked and laughed and sat around the table and just enjoyed each other's company. And we give ourselves the freedom not to be productive every week in our life group because we're actually not there to produce anything. We're there to live life together. Maybe you say, that makes me uncomfortable. Okay. Lots of stuff makes you uncomfortable that you do. Maybe that's a place to dive in. I love this text in Matthew chapter 11, and I particularly like Eugene Peterson's paraphrase of it, Matthew chapter 11, verse 28 and down through 30. Are you tired, worn out, burned out on religion? Come to me. Get away with me and you'll recover your life. I'll show you how to take a real rest. Walk with me and work with me. Watch how I do it. Learn the unforced rhythms of grace. I won't lay anything heavy or ill-fitting on you. Keep company with me, and you'll learn to live freely and lightly. Jesus says, come, abide with me, rest with me, and I'll give you the best life available. And so what does it mean to abide for you? What's the next step to step into more abiding in your life this year? And then he says that God's glorified when your life bears fruit. That God is glorified when your life bears fruit. In verse 8, he says this, by this my Father is glorified, that you bear much fruit and prove to be my disciples. I remember when I was young, I used to think that bearing fruit meant getting people to accept Jesus and come into the kingdom, like that bearing fruit in the kingdom was saving people's souls or getting people saved. And while I really do think that's an important piece, I've come to believe that is actually not what Jesus is talking about. I think he's really talking about Galatians 5, where he talks about the fruit of the Spirit. Right? Starting in verse 18 of Galatians chapter 5. But if you're led by the Spirit, you're not under the law. Now the works of the flesh are evident: sexual immorality, impurity, sensuality, idolatry, sorcery, enmity, strife, jealousy, fits of anger, rivalries, dissensions, divisions, envy, drunkenness, orgies, and things like these. And I warn you, he says, as I warned you before, that those who do such things will not inherit the kingdom of God. Now I want you to think about, just for a second, how often when there's division and striving and brokenness in your life, it doesn't lead you into the abundant life. Think about that. He's saying you can't have the kingdom of God. What is the kingdom of God? The kingdom of God is Jesus and it's abundant life. Jesus says that in John 17, and this is life, that you may know me and know the Father. What Paul's saying here is, if you're paying all your attention to the flesh, you will not have the kingdom life. You won't have the abundant life. It's not like if you don't follow the rules, you don't get in the club. It's more like if you don't live in this way, you don't get the joy of it. It just isn't going to happen. There are times when we try to live in the way of the world and hope for the blessing and the fruit of the kingdom. Paul's just saying it's not going to happen. You're not going to inherit the kingdom of God if you live that way. But the fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. And against such things there's no law. You want to have life? That's it. Those who belong to Christ have crucified the flesh with its passions and desires and have given themselves to the kingdom and to the Spirit. And what flows out of that life is the abundant life and the fruit of the Spirit. And when the fruit of the Spirit is present in our life, then God is glorified. When love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, gentleness, faithfulness, self-control, and all of the rest of it flows out of our lives into the world, God is glorified because the world sees Him in us, and they are drawn to that. And then Jesus says finally in this text, joy is found in the fruitful life. He says, "These things I've spoken to you, that my joy may be in you, and your joy may be full." Notice that joy was the second listed in the fruit of the Spirit. The fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, patience. These are the things that Christ wants to grow in you. I want to just, as I close, take you back to my last weekend. Really, because I had decided to instead of not throw so many things in my mouth, I decided to add hurry in to the mix. And truthfully, the day was not peaceful. There was probably some love in it. It wasn't that joyful. I wasn't very patient. I wasn't faithful to my wife or to Johnny or to the church that I went to because I showed up there in not a good place. And so my heart and what I knew that I had to think about as soon as that started to unravel was, what does God want in my life for fruit to be born this year? And it's that. So it's hurry. I have to ruthlessly remove it from my life. That's and abide. So what's got to go in your life? What is it that's stealing your joy? What is it that's sucking the life out of your life? What is it that's keeping you from having the best life that you can have? Because that is what Jesus came to bring us. That's what the abundant life is, the blessed life. And so I want to invite you, as you think that through, what is it that has been on your mind since I've been talking about this? Maybe you have the same thing that I have, but you probably have some other kind of sickness, some other weakness. But I want to invite you not to go into this year without taking store and purposefully making some decisions about change. When I look back over my life over the last 30 to 40 years, even maybe until back when I was a kid, hurry's always been a part of my life. And I realize that I haven't done a very good job of figuring that out and sorting it out. And I could become discouraged by that, but I've decided not to. There, I think, is a Chinese proverb that goes something like this: when is the best time to plant a tree? Well, it's 20 years ago. What's the second best time to plant a tree? Today. So maybe there's something in your life you go, yeah, I've been working on this for 20 years. Maybe you have. So maybe today's the day to say, I'm going to take another run at this, and I'm going to find help. Who's going to help you? Who are you going to walk with? So that maybe at the end of 2020, you look back and you say, something really did change. Something really did make a difference.